Greetings, programs. Welcome to the Awesome Friday podcast. My name is Matthew, and with me, as always, is Simon. Say hello, Simon.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today, as well as we are, which is pretty well, I think. How are you?
I think you used the word "well" too much.
Does it sound like I'm actually lying?
No, it just sounds like you need a thesaurus, that's all.
How dare you? It's my job. I know good words. I know some better than good words. Some gooder words, even.
Are you trying to say you have the best words? Because the quote has some devious connotations now.
I absolutely do. But no, I'm okay. I've got visitors here, and we were out late last night. And let me tell you, taking the entire family to a cinema is an expensive and stressful business. It's so expensive. It's so expensive to take people to go and watch a movie, right? Obviously the tickets, which are very expensive, and then the food, which is unbelievable for even the most basic. I don't know. I think there should be a law that if you're selling kids food, it should be at kids prices, not the same price as adult food.
The movie theater experience has been expensive for a long time, so I don't disagree with any particular point.
It's been a while since we've taken the whole family, and during the pandemic, I've put a lot of effort into making my own little film room, and honestly, it does such a good job. I've got surround sound set up, and I've got a nice TV, and I'm quite close to the TV, and there's no windows, and it's completely black, and it does such a good job of being a movie screening room that I'm starting to wonder if I even want to go to the cinema anymore because it's so expensive. It's so expensive. But one of the movies we're going to talk about, I saw last night, and it was on Screen X, which basically means they project the sides. Some scenes have the sides projected onto as well. And
it's three. It's basically three movie screens, right? Imagine a 3 computer monitors setup, and then it's just that, but in a movie theater scale.
Yeah, kind of. The walls are not the same. It's just walls instead of a screen, so it's a bit more faded. But what I was really happy about is that I was worried they were just going to stretch the image, so you basically force the ratio across the screen 3 areas. But it turns out they must have shot specific extra footage for these side screens. It must be a thing. Mm-hmm. I've never heard of it before, because it was just extra stuff, and because it was the kind of movie it was pretty damn cool. It was great, actually.
Yeah, the movie you're talking about, which we will be talking about a little later, we nearly saw in Screen X, but then didn't. I nearly saw Doctor Strange in Screen X, but then also didn't.
Oh, okay.
But maybe I should give it a try. I don't usually like the gimmicky ways of seeing a movie. I don't really care for 3D or D-Box, which is the rumbling seats.
Oh, yeah, that's bad.
And I don't really. If I want to see an IMAX movie, I'll just go to an IMAX theater. That's the one gimmick.
Yeah.
Is IMAX. I kind of.
That's what Screen X really is. It's just Wish IMAX. It's not every scene, and it's kind of.
It's Wish.com IMAX. That's amazing.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And the side screens are kind of angled. They're not full rectangles, so it's fine. It does add to the experience. Not like D-Box, which detracts from the experience, and 3D, which detracts from the experience. But it actually does add something. When it comes on, you're like, oh shit, yeah. Wow, that's actually really cool to look around and see side stuff.
It's funny, actually. The best version of D-Box, if there is a good version of it, which again, I'm not sure what they call it in other markets, but that's where the seats rumble and move. It's 4 in most Cineplex theaters here in Vancouver anyway. It's 4 rows in the middle of the theater, and the best version of it is actually sitting about 2 rows in front or behind of it, so you get just the subtlest of shakes from the chairs from other people, and instead of being right on top of it. But anyway,
I think I saw Rogue One. One of the times I saw Rogue One, I paid through the roof for D-Box, and I turned it off completely within minutes of the first screen. Because when I want to watch a movie, I don't want a giant man picking up my seat and just shaking it side to side randomly throughout the whole movie. It's just, I thought it was awful. Made me feel a bit sick.
Yeah. Well, I skipped over our intro, so this is where I say that this week we're going to talk about two movies like we usually do, and we're going to start with
Mhm.
one indie Canadian film which I like, and I'm I'm pretty sure Simon doesn't. And then we're going to move on to one of the biggest blockbusters of the year, one of the best movies of the year so far, I would say. Spoiler alert. But let's dive right into this Canadian indie feature, which is called The Righteous. It is the feature writing, directing debut of Canadian actor Mark O'Brien. It stars a who's who of Canadian sort of character talent, and it's a story. I don't really want to tell you too much about the story, but it's a movie that deals with faith and guilt and grief, and it's very stagey, and it's shot in, I think, really beautiful black and white. And I don't know how much of a plot synopsis do you think I can give without spoiling too much of it.
It's like not much more. Like it does have. It's a bit of a tropey setup that mysterious stranger who seems nice has sinister undertones, and the
Yeah,
truth
so
is that's pretty much what you need to know, really.
yeah, Henry Czerny play and Mimi Kuzik play an older couple whose adopted daughter has just passed away. So they're in the throes of grief, and in the middle of the night, a mysterious stranger played by Mark O'Brien shows up and throws the world into upheaval. And it's shot in black and white, and it's not the subtlest of movies, which will be a theme this week, actually. um, but it is very. I mean, we've talked about this. First off, let's just say we've talked about this movie before. I originally saw it at Fantasia Festival 2021 last summer, but it is finally getting a theatrical and streaming release from Vortex Media this week, actually. So you will have a chance to see it. Um, and I think this is the first time you have seen it, right, Simon? So I've
Yes,
seen it.
that's right. Yeah,
I
that's
watched it
right.
again this week because I got to speak to Mark O'Brien this week. So check out the feed for the episode immediately previous to this one, to me talking about to Mark O'Brien about the movie. And I like it. I anyone who's been listening for a while knows that I am predisposed to films that are very stagey and play-like, and this is a movie in which character actors sit around a table and talk a lot, so it works for me. Um, I think that the my personal take, which I don't know why I said that out loud, but is that the screenplay could probably use a bit of polish. Although, to be fair, the movie was nominated for 3 Canadian Screen Awards this year, including Best Original Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor for Mark O'Brien himself. And that was a hell of a face you just gave me.
Come on, this is a podcast. You're not meant to.
That's right. It's a radio show. We have to describe what's happening.
Oh, the
So
face, the
I'm
face
just
is
gonna
off camera.
stop there. I feel like I've talked about this movie a lot. I wrote a review. I've podcasted about it. I've spoken to the director, and it is also the kind of religious thriller stagey thing that Simon tends to either glom onto or bounce directly off. So let's find out which one of those things it is.
Here's the thing, right? There's a couple of genres. I love Stranger turns up and has more than meets the eye. Like apart from Transformers, I love that genre. Um, I as a raised Catholic, as a religious person, I enjoy dramas about um, the conflicts within religion, like people facing personal conflicts that kind of challenge their faith and what they do to get through that. I enjoy that. I enjoy theatre very much. So I don't know. This in the last 2 years, we've had a story where a priest has a crisis of faith and tries to work that through that, and a mysterious stranger comes to their environment who is revealed to be not what they thought and add dark tones. And through his battle with this person, everyone speaks in extended monologues about their lives. One of them was Midnight Mass, and the other one was The Righteous. And I feel like, as a parallel, Midnight Mass was so spectacularly written with nuance and subtlety, and used the story beats to slowly unravel the story it was trying to tell. I feel like The Righteous, for me, was the other side of that coin. You touched on it, talking about the screenplay needing a touch up. I think the whole thing was without subtlety or nuance, or even within its own logic. Like
Mm,
the I it the monologues, when people started just monologuing about their life issues to really random strangers, really at the beginning, it didn't that didn't feel authentic to me, and I wouldn't say I enjoyed the writing. It didn't move me. It didn't interest me. It didn't help the story along, I think. And the when it came to the revelation of who this person is, sorry, that if you've seen it, that's a pun.
hmm.
Um, the logic of the last third just made no sense to me at all, and I didn't uh, like or agree with the decisions that were made. It just felt like very much like a first year drama production. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, as a person who taught drama for years and years and years and years, people start without nuance. And you teach them how to tell a story with nuance. That's really the main job I had. And there's nothing wrong with the ideas, and there's nothing like the execution was okay. It was shot. There were some really interesting shots, some very nice deep framing shots and negative space shots. So I thought it was, like, technically it was made very very well. But the acting was fine. Like, everyone was fine. But the the script and the delivery and the way the story went from one beat to another just felt like it needed a number of passes to add a bit more nuance and a bit more subtlety and a bit less, um, fewer sinister undertones. I don't know. Do you know what? I'm trying not to spoil anything, but the last 20 minutes, I'd already thought it was not great, and then the last 20 minutes really underlined that for me.
Interesting. I think that the comparison to Midnight Mass is both. I think I. What am I trying to say? I think the comparison to Midnight Mass is both fair and unfair at the same time for a couple of reasons. I think it's fair because they do both deal with guilt and loss of faith. Um, uh, and they both star like a who's who of character talent. Um, I think it's unfair because Midnight Mass had 7 hours to tell its story versus the 90 minutes that this did. And also, they probably got to spend more in any 10 minutes of that 7 hours than this movie got to spend on its entire 90. Like, I know for a fact because he told me that the whole budget for this entire project was only 650,000 Canadian dollars, which
Wow.
is, I think when you factor that in, and it's not really fair to be like you should like it because it was cheap to make, but like when you factor that in a little bit, it's a little more impressive to me that they were able to make this for that little. But I don't also disagree with anything you're particularly saying. I think this is a story that will either work for you or not. Um, I'm a little sad it didn't really work for you. It does work for me. Um, I think that you know, speaking about the script a little more. Speaking about his Canadian Screen Award nominations, I don't want to say I was surprised that Mark O'Brien was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but I will say that I was surprised that Henry Czerny wasn't nominated for Best Actor. And same with Mimi Kuzik, she wasn't nominated either. Um, and speaking about the script, I mean, it's the type of thing where I think it's good and a little unsubtle, and I really honestly can't wait to see what he does next.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of your points are valid. Obviously, Midnight Mass bigger budget and a much longer runtime, but I do think, like, and I've said before, with low budget movies, the director, the only thing the director can really control is the quality of the script, because everything else has to be a compromise. I actually am really impressed that he made it look that way with the budget he had, because again, I think as a director he's got real talent. I would definitely watch whatever he makes next. Some of the first introduction of the stranger has this beautiful negative space shot that has a very deep focus with Henry Zoni in dark shadow hearing something outside, with this
Mm-hmm.
patch of light in the foreground, and it's very theatrical actually. And then the stranger just kind of crawls or falls into it, and a lot of the shots have the same kind of quality. So technically, I'm really impressed he made it look like that. But I think you can find nuance in 90 minutes, just like you can find nuance in 10 hours. And as a budgetary thing, that's completely still within his control.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I don't disagree with any of your points, but I still think there could have been a better approach to the story that was being told, and certainly the last 20 minutes, like a look at what was he trying to say by the ending, and because it negates any kind of philosophical or religious struggle that the priest was having earlier. It's really hard to talk about the ending without spoiling it, but there is a
I would say that what you're saying is true, but only if you take the last couple of shots completely literally.
yeah, that's fair. There's always is this where we start talking about metaphors again? There's always
This is where we start talking about, and I actually I spoke with Mark about this a little bit. We didn't like spoil the ending, but um, I think that the ending of the film is designed to be. I know it's designed to be sort of deliberately ambiguous. So if you do take it in a literal sense, then it's not going to make any sense. Like if
but
you.
even in a metaphorical sense, though, what it symbolizes, what it stands for, because it's the result of something he directly said earlier
Mhm.
in the movie, and the conflict when when everything's revealed and the conflict is revealed, the there's no way out for them for the main character, even if you take the end as literal or metaphorical. There is no salvation for for the main character, and the whole topic of the whole movie up to that point has been trying to find a way to accept punishment and find forgiveness. And I think he could have played with that a lot more than actually dooming this priest from the outset, really.
Uh, yeah, so I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I will say that the way it resolves works for me. And I think,
It's
and
almost like
again,
art.
it's almost like art is subjective, almost. And I think, like I said, I said earlier that I think this is a story that will either work for you or not, and I think it just clearly it does for me, and it doesn't for you. And I think
I mean,
that's pretty in line
yeah,
with the general consensus as well. For just looking at reviews before we started, um, that people tend to either, interestingly, spoiler alert, I gave it, I'll give it a 3 out of 5, and I think that interestingly, I'm kind of in the middle. You know, like a lot of people give it either higher or lower than me. Most people give it either
right.
higher or lower. So it's uh, but
It's
you
a
know,
two from me. I think I did like some subtleties of Henry Selinger acting. I did really like the way it was shot. That's enough for it to get a two for me. I am very
yeah,
much looking forward to what he makes next.
it's interesting actually. Circling back again to the Canadian Screen Awards, it's super interesting to me that it didn't get nominated for any kind of like cinematography or anything like that.
But it
Which
did for
is,
writing.
yeah, yeah, and acting too. And weirdly, not again, not it's not weird that Mark O'Brien would be nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this. But it is weird that the third nomination was also for Best Supporting Actor, and it was for her name just went out of my brain, but she plays what's her name? Kate Corbett. She plays a character called Doris, who is like the the birth mother of the older couple's adopted daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And she's only, I mean, she's not just, again, not to say that she's bad, because I think she's quite good in what little screen time she has, but also I don't get why they were nominated and nobody else was. And again, this all comes down to awards don't actually mean anything because it's all just a big popularity contest. But well, that's a hell of a face.
I'm not trying to be. I don't want to be negative. I don't like being negative about other people's art. Mark, if you're listening to this, I thought it was really well directed. I'm sorry. I really look forward to your next thing. Um, did you say that Kate Corbett got nominated for an acting award
Yeah,
from this movie?
but Henry Czerny and Mimi Kuzik did not.
I mean, yeah, I'm just going to echo what you're saying. Then, who knows what goes into nominations?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
There was another movie we watched that I actually didn't finish because I hated it so much recently that got nominated for a bunch. It actually won a Canadian like film like best of the festival. Do you remember that UFO movie? What was that called? The cult movie with your
Oh,
Lois and Superman actress in it. It's called
yeah,
just popped up on Crave as well.
Cosmic Dawn or something, right?
Cosmic
We
Dawn,
Yeah, we
and
actually didn't end up talking about it because we were both kind of,
I had to turn it
we'll say
off.
we were soft on it. Would be a polite way to put it.
I know I was hard on it, just the
Yeah,
wrong kind of hard. um, yeah, so that won a pretty substantial award. So who knows what goes into all this?
I have a what award did it win?
Didn't it win like best of one of the festivals?
I don't know. Now I'm
Because
keep keep talking. I'm gonna have to figure this out
I
because
was
I don't remember it winning that at all. I don't remember winning anything at all.
I was I was googling it and trying to find out um, some of the cast. I think.
I will say if you're talking about like if it won like a festival award, and
Yeah,
again, I don't want to besmirch any festival, but there's a lot of festivals, and a lot of them give awards to a lot of weird things.
yeah,
There's enough awards out there that every movie could win too, and there would be
yeah.
awards left over. So
Yes. Anyway, yeah. Who knows what goes into nominations such as these? But yeah, it's a two. It's probably just a two from me. But it didn't. The story was not told adequately for me, and I hated the last 20 minutes from a story point of view. I hated it.
well, that sucks. But again,
But I'm
art
glad
is
you liked
subjective.
it.
Art
I
is
know, I
subjective.
know.
So
You should still like anytime any of us says we love or hate something, you should still watch it to find out you listeners to find out what you think of it because it's one person's voice. It's and your own opinions are very important. Media literacy is very important, and you only get that by watching as much stuff as you can from all over the world.
yeah, and also I would argue that sometimes my most interesting reactions to a film or show are when someone who I listen to or read really doesn't like it. And then when I go and watch it, my own reaction is uh, often more interesting. So,
There you
yeah.
go.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's The Righteous. That is actually, it's in theaters this week, and I believe it is having a streaming debut this coming week. So check your local listings, as it were.
Yes.
Do we have local listings, or do we just have the internet now? We just have the
We
internet
just
now,
have
right?
the
Yeah.
internet is everyone's local listings. That's it.
Remember when TV Guide was the thing you had to have?
I do.
Yeah. Do you even have TV? You only
Oh,
had 4 channels. Did you even need a TV guide?
we still, hey, easy. Whoa, now, yes, we did need a TV guide just for BBC. Thank you very much. It's the
I
pride
mean,
of the world.
I say that derisively, but where I grew up, we only got 5 channels. So it's,
And
yeah.
you're on an island. Did you have the houses with the massive satellite dishes so you could actually get anything? You don't
When I was a child, we had a giant antenna, like a giant like fish, like the I can't remember how to describe it, like the type of thing you see on top of like buildings in New York, mounted on a
have.
huge on top of a tree. And then when I
Hmm.
was a teenager, we got a 10-foot satellite dish, and we had
Uh,
to register a PO box in Washington State so that we could subscribe to American channels, which is how I got HBO. How we got HBO when I was a teenager, which really helped my like form me as a movie nerd.
wow, that's awesome.
But it was like I don't people don't really realize, but you know, because now we just have cable and streaming. And in the early zeros, we had those little digital satellite dishes that were small. They're like what, 2 feet across or whatever, and they just point at one satellite and get all the channels. But
Yeah.
the 10-foot satellite dish that we had when I was a kid, you had to like so there's a number of satellites, and each was at a different position in the sky, and each of them had 24 channels. So if you wanted to tune something in, you had to turn the satellite dish and tune the channel.
So you actually had to go outside and like physically shift this 10-foot disc.
No, so we didn't. Ours, the one that my dad got for us, came with like a motor, so you could control it from a thing inside. But
Wow, you were
we knew people
fancy.
who had one that you had to like go move. It was it was
Wow.
rural living at its best.
Wow.
Anyway, that's very much like our next movie. Uh, this past week saw the release of Top Gun Maverick, a 30 plus year later sequel to the 80s classic Top Gun, starring Tom Cruise, directed by Kaczynski. What's his name? Kaczynski, the guy who directed
Joseph
Joseph
Kosinski, yeah.
Kaczynski, who directed Tron Legacy and Only the Brave and Oblivion. And it's really good. And
It
that's my
is really, really good.
review. It's really, really good, and you should see it.
It's
So,
good. It's sorry. Go ahead.
no,
Do you
we
want me to
saw.
summarize?
I saw it opening night, and you saw it last night. I
Hmm.
am actually fairly desperate to see it again. I really want to see it in IMAX, but I don't think I'll be able to.
Hmm.
Um, and it is a. It's a. It's basically as legacy sequels go. It is basically perfect, and as action movies go, it is basically perfect. And as a movie, it is it's basically a perfect movie. That's what I'm trying to
I
say
mean,
here.
functionally, there's very little wrong with it. Like, if anything, from a structural point of view, there's very little wrong with this movie. How many films can you say that are not? Jurassic Park is a similar movie. Like, functionally, it's pretty much perfect.
Yeah,
And what's really nice as well for me personally is that there's basically two shots of CGI in this movie, and you know that there's two shots because they really stand out because everything else is famous actors strapped into F-14s or whatever the fancy planes are, being flown around at
F
ridiculous
18s.
F-18s being flown around at ridiculous speeds. So when there is a shot of like this is not a spoiler, a plane going through an explosion, just there's a few of those. It's not a spoiler, and so
Yeah,
you can actually see, oh yeah, that's CG because everything else like looks, unless it's the best CG I've ever seen in my life, it looks absolutely real, and I'm pretty sure they actually sent them up and did
they
capture
did.
them in the planes, right?
They did. Yeah, Tom Cruise learned to fly a jet plane, but also they went up there in twin seat F-18s with someone in the pilot's seat and them in the back seat.
Yeah.
Um, the F-18 has 2 current variants, one of which is a single seater, one of which is a double seater, but that's a whole other thing.
Nerd.
It is, uh, and I mean, to summarize the film, uh, at the beginning of the film, Maverick, who's now a Navy captain, um, is working on a test pilot program, and after doing a test run in defiance of his superiors, he's called back to Top Gun by his friend Iceman, who's now a 4-star admiral, to teach a bunch of young hotshots to fly a very specific mission. And then they fly that mission, and that's basically the whole movie. The main conflict in the movie is that one of the young hotshots, played by Miles Teller, is Rooster, who is the son of Goose, and they have a strained relationship, although not for the reason you probably expect going into that story, which I really liked.
Mhm.
Uh, and I'm going to say right now that as a person who, like, Top Gun is a formative film from my childhood
Mhm.
for
This
for a number of reasons.
so
This is a better movie than that.
this is what I was thinking in the cinema last night because I have zero nostalgia for Top Gun. Like when I was the age it came out, I was watching almost exclusively martial arts movies, Jean Claude Van Damme, and science fiction movies. And I went through a period of not really liking Tom Cruise very much. So Top Gun has zero nostalgia for me. And so when I was watching this movie, I enjoyed it very, very much, but I was not affected by nostalgia. But I thought, God, if there's anyone who watches this who loves this movie, this is so well done in adapting the original parts of this movie and it doing that very tricky line of callbacks, but not without reason. You know, they're
Hmm.
not doing a Star Wars where they're like, oh look, it's that guy from that thing, and oh god, like
Although,
everything
although,
was
although they are
well. I
kind of
mean,
doing a Star Wars, but that's we'll talk about that in a minute.
yeah, they are absolutely doing a Star Wars, but every part of the old film that was used in the new film was used as a genuine part of the story. And that's one of the things that really impressed me, like how well it was put together and how well it was developed from story beats of the first one. But I was
Not
thinking, God, if
just
this must be like the second coming for a Top Gun fan to
yeah,
see this.
and what you're talking about isn't just like when you mentioned that it's basically structurally perfect. The really interesting thing is that the basic story structure of Top Gun Maverick is exactly the same
Mm,
as Top Gun. Like it starts out with Pete Mitchell on a mission which he succeeds but kind of fails, and then he's sent to Top Gun, and then the hotshot young students at Top Gun make a fool of themselves in front of their new instructor, and then like it goes on and on and on. Like every major story beat is somehow replicated in this one, um,
and
and
he wins them over by taking all their shirts off, which is nice.
and yet right down to the like they don't in the original they play volleyball at the beach, and in this one they play football on the beach, except they play it at sunset, which I think is a better choice. uh,
Always.
um, it's interesting because one of the major criticisms of Top Gun is that it is sort of absent of a political stance. It's basically just like 1980s Reaganism, we're the best, hoorah! And this one is also absent of a political stance, but like in a different way, if that makes sense. Like it's not in a lot of ways it's very much, we don't have the technology, so we have to be the best pilots. Is we have to still
Mhm,
be exceptional. And when it
mhm.
really comes down to it, is this film is really a really unsubtle metaphor for practical blockbuster filmmaking, and also commenting on Tom Cruise aging as a movie star. And I don't want to spoil any of the movie to explain that to you right now, but
No, you
it's
don't.
uh it's so much of the film is commenting on those two things, and I kind of love it for that. It does.
That,
I saw
that,
Patrick Willems this morning retweeted that he said that like his mind is so warped from the last 15 years of blockbusters that this movie kind of feels like a triumph of old school for adults movie making, and it
yeah,
kind of does.
yeah.
And I know that like this movie does a really good job of appealing to everyone who's going to watch it. Like it's definitely like my 8-year-old nephew saw it, and I think your kids
My
loved
kids,
it.
yeah.
Your 8 and 11-year-old
But
kids loved it.
I wish I'd had my camera. I'm not an asshole, so I don't ever have my phone or camera out during a movie. But I wish I had last night because there's a moment in the last third where something does something
Hmm.
successfully, and my son, because we were sat, me and my wife and my kids were immediately in front of us, full on air punch the air and screams, "Yeah!"
That's amazing.
Like, and so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's a perfect movie. It's a perfect summer movie. It's a perfect
Hmm.
blockbuster movie. It's a testament to Tom Cruise's crazy we should do this shit for real method of making
Hmm.
movies.
Hmm.
And at the same time a comment on he's kind of getting too old to do this shit much longer. And interestingly, and I think I said this, I guess we didn't restart podcasting until after Mission Impossible Fallout, but it's also a nice reminder that when he needs to, he's actually a really good actor.
Hmm.
There's
Oh yeah.
a scene in the middle, the scene where he goes to visit the older person who will give him advice to whether he needs to go for the mission or not, which in this movie is Val Kilmer. That scene
Did you
genuinely
cry?
made me tear up. Like, genuinely. Not just because of how well acted it was, but also because it was just kind of nice to see Val Kilmer, who, has been, in the last several years, has had throat cancer and had parts of his voice box removed, and still, A, just being there, but B, genuinely acting through all of that, and then using one of them. He spends most of that scene speaking via computer, and when he finally musters up the energy to speak, it's genuinely affecting, or at least it
Yeah.
was for me.
No, it made me quite emotional, and I have no connection with these characters whatsoever. So I was thinking of you, like bawling, like
Yeah,
it's Iceman and Maverick.
yeah.
And the what I found really interesting as well is, I'm not the biggest fan of Val Kilmer as an actor, but when you've got someone who has who's had that much physical trauma to his acting, like productive parts of his body, and he's acting by typing things into a computer, but he still is like the looks he was giving, like the subtleties he was giving with his body language was just like unbelievable. Like he he acted really well without saying really anything, and just with a few looks and a few points. Like
Hmm.
it was top notch. I was really happy to see him, of course, but yeah, he's been through a lot.
Oh, and also, just within the story, it was nice that I thought it was really nice that Maverick and Iceman were such close friends.
Hmm.
They spent the whole first movie being the rivals, and then in the third act they go on a mission together, and Maverick saves his ass, and they have the whole "you can be my wingman anytime" bullshit. You can be mine, and it's kind of heartwarming that they are now best friends. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's 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 nice that. Like you said earlier, it's nice that everything that calls back to the original film is very purposeful and very
Mhm.
well executed and very plot and character relevant. I think what makes this movie for me, what makes it a better movie, because in a lot of ways it's the same movie, but what makes it a better movie is that there are actual themes and actual character development. And the first one does kind of lack that a little bit.
Hmm.
Or maybe not,
Totally.
maybe
Yeah.
not a little bit.
No, Top Gun is not known for being a deep movie. Like people love that movie because it's a balls out. It's almost like a Michael Bay style, like complete um,
I mean, it's Tony Scott. It's Tony
thing.
Scott's formative,
Exactly.
and it's
But even
also one
for
of the earliest examples of the quote '80s Tom Cruise movie. Where he's a
mm,
young hotshot, and there's an older woman
yeah.
who seduces him, or a woman in power who gets seduced by, who is the best at what he does, but is reckless, and then has to rein himself in the third act to really self actualize and win the day. Like, if you've watched '80s Tom Cruise movies, especially this one and Days of Thunder, aka Top Gun but cars, there's a whole formula. There's a whole
You
formula.
know, I've never seen Days of Thunder. I don't really wish to, but
Honestly,
um,
Days of Thunder is great, but it's literally Top Gun but with cars.
and I did like the very very subtle metaphor about um, Tom Cruise getting older, and that there's a number of scenes, most of them delivered by the wonderful John Hamm, who I just wish would be in everything because he makes every movie better. John
That's true.
Hamm is like in his perfect role as like army navy commander who chews Tom Cruise out. Like
Hmm.
he's just perfect.
Excuse
But
me,
the thing
Navy
he says,
two-star admiral.
oh, my mistake. And there's things like, oh, we don't fly those ships anymore. They're dinosaurs. And every time he makes a reference to something being old, it cuts to Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise does like almost licks the camera, like this is really about me. Like we can't fly this more. It's the planes are too old, and Tom Cruise, it's not about the plane. It's about the man in the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Flips the camera, and it's not cheesy. I think that's the key, isn't it? It's not cheesy. It's done with heart, and it's done with commitment and
Sincerity. The word you're looking for is sincerity.
sincerity, and it's massively over the top without being stupid. And it just works. It works really, really well. I will be honest, there's parts of this movie that would, because I have no nostalgia, there were parts in the middle of this movie that I thought where the pace dropped a little bit. It was maybe a 3. I was thinking, yeah, this is a solid 3-star movie. I like this. Maybe if I love Top Gun, it'll be 5. But the last act is like, this is clearly a 4, maybe even a 5, because
Yeah.
if you go and watch this movie, yes, it does lull in the middle, but then it might be intentional to go really, really slow, because the last 40 minutes is like, that's worth the ticket price alone. When they do the thing,
So
and the thing's going, yeah.
I would say that where you're talking about it lulling, to me, isn't a flaw, because almost all of the stuff where it lulls is setting up not just the intra-character conflict, especially between Maverick and Rooster, and then Maverick trying to figure out, it's also then him figuring out how he's going to have to resolve that conflict. And then in the last act, the conflict is resolved. Like it's not without payoff, right? Like it's introduction,
Yeah.
setup, and payoff. And it's true that like it starts out with a test flight, which is it's one plane going in a straight line, but manages to be beautiful and intense. And then the first scene of flying at Top Gun at the beginning of at sort of the end of the first, beginning of the second act, is a pretty incredible montage of dogfighting. And then there is a lull as they have to sort out all this character work. But by doing all that in the second act, when they go into the final set piece, everything is in place. There's a bunch of exposition in the middle of this movie, that's true, but then there's none at the end, right? Because you know everything and you feel everything and it's fine. And my feedback is that it is a 5 out of 5 and I have no notes.
Can we please talk about Jennifer Connelly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she's great. And I know that I as a Top Gun lover, I know that it would have been nice to see Kelly McGillis come back, but she doesn't really appear in movies anymore, as far as I can tell. And Jennifer Connelly is wonderful in this movie, and her role is
really
basically like a person who tells Maverick exactly what he needs to hear, exactly when he needs to hear it. But she does it. She manages. It's the most thinly written of character, but she manages to make this character a whole person with very little to work with.
I loved her character. I love the setup of her as a single mother, and I love the sort of age appropriacy of their relationship. I love how this the sex scene between the old people is them talking. It's like, just get out Wordle and do that. Like, let's make it super authentic.
It's funny because I remember you telling me that like you didn't want to take your kids because there was apparently like a weird, upsetting sex scene, and me being like, and me texting back and being like, "There's like the sex scene isn't even a sex scene. Like they kiss twice, and then it cuts to them talking in bed. Like
I got my hopes up seeing Jennifer Connelly in an upsetting set scene, because there's lots of sites that tell you the beats of a movie in relation to, can you take the kids to this movie? And many of them are really, really useful. My kids get very upset by very specific things like knives, blood, and jump scares. And then any kind of overt sex I want to avoid at their age. But So one of the sites was like, it was pretty good, but it was unfortunately one really upsetting sex scene, and I wonder if they saw a different cut of this movie than I did
So
because there's some.
interestingly, I am acquainted with a person who, because this movie's been delayed because of the pandemic 3 or 4 times, at least 3 times. So I know someone who saw it at the original like press screenings 2 and change years ago, and
Oh,
they saw it and they wrote a review in time for like the first embargo and release date, and then it got delayed. So they were sitting on a review of this film for like 2 years. Um, but the point is that they then saw it. They then saw it again when it came out, and they were because they were wondering the same thing. Like it was a little bit temp tracked, and there was some missing songs
mm,
on the version they saw. But then when they saw it again, they were like, "Nope, this is the same movie. It's definitely finished, but it's shot for shot. It's exactly the same."
right, interesting. Um, in terms of the way it's put together as well, I do. Going back to what you mentioned something earlier about that tweet you retweeted, when I went to Whistler, we had AMC on cable, and I spent much of the weekend with AMC on in the background, just moaning how they didn't make movies like that anymore, like good adult action movies that kids can also watch to a point.
Hmm.
And this feels like a direct callback to that because it was an adult action movie, but I'm so appreciative that they they could have shown a more explicit sex scene. They could have been more like even blood or people dying, nice people dying. But it was, I don't know if it was intentional, but it turned out to be a movie that you can take your whole family to completely safely.
Hmm.
And everyone from the youngest to the oldest will get something out of it. My wife certainly, during when Miles Teller did his little shimmy, I looked at my wife and she had, I think her face was like 90% grin,
Oh,
just like teeth everywhere.
you mean during the football scene?
During the football scene where someone runs into Miles Teller and he kind of does this little shoulder like Elvis thing,
Yeah,
and
it's in the trailer. I know the one you mean.
and she was so she loved that. So there's something for everyone, and
Yeah,
I really appreciate that it's a nice, really old fashioned kind of movie, but just done really really well.
yeah. You know who else I really like in this movie, and who I hope this movie finally helps like break out in a big way. I know that doesn't really happen in the same way that it used to, but I really hope it does happen. Is Glenn Powell? I love Glenn Powell.
Who is
Who
he? Because he was great.
he plays Hangman, who's like another
Yeah.
pilot in the program. He It was interesting because when I remember years ago when Miles Teller was first announced, and it was like Glenn Powell had gone to like read for the film. Everyone was like, Powell would be perfect to play Goose's son. But I think what as I might be wrong, what I remember happening is Miles Teller getting the part and them liking Glenn Powell so much they wrote him into the movie. like they,
Really? Oh,
um,
that's great. He was great.
but Glenn Powell is never not great. He's always great. He's very charismatic. He has a wonderful screen presence, and even in this one, where he's kind of playing an asshole, he's kind of playing an asshole that you love the whole time. And his interplay, especially with Miles Teller, is quite good in the movie, and I very
Yeah.
much appreciate him. And not for nothing, I have a person who has mixed feelings about Miles Teller, but Miles Teller is he's very good in this movie. He's very good in this movie.
He is. He is, which I never thought I would say that because he is a personality vacuum in many, many other movies that I've seen him in, and he was actually great in this.
Yeah, I think Miles Teller is occasionally wonderful. And
I haven't
interestingly,
seen Whiplash, actually.
one of the other movies I think he's great in is that movie Only the Brave, which is a story about bush firefighters with Josh
Mm-hmm.
Brolin, and that's also a Joseph Kosinski movie.
Yeah,
So interesting connection there. And yes, you should definitely see Whiplash. Like that is a
probably
good
should.
movie.
I really like Monica Barbaro as well as the
Hmm.
only female Top Gun pilot, and there was a really nice foil between Hangman, Glenn Powell's Hangman, and her. And I thought they got the balance of the young bucks really, really well. No one was really obnoxious, even though Hangman was obnoxious, but it came from a very maverick place of absolute confidence in yourself. So his you end up actually like liking him almost. And I really like the really quiet, like Bob was in there as well. I thought that was fantastic. Actually, the writing of this movie was credited to two guys and Christopher McQuarrie, and I would put money on the things that McQuarrie touched, because you can hear like his style of writing is so distinct. He is such a great script writer.
He's
There's some
also
really
he's also
wonderful moments.
he's also Tom Cruise's go-to guy right now too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Like
yeah,
everything they've done together has been great, and it's not a
yeah,
surprise that they keep working together. But
yeah.
and I'm obviously very much looking forward to the Missions Impossibles 7 and 8.
Well, it's
Uh,
funny. This movie about, can Tom Cruise like be this action movie a hero anymore? And it's preceded by the trailer for the new Mission Impossible, where he looks amazing, still in this action hero role. Simon Pegg looks ancient now. I don't know what he's been through the mill a few times. Everyone's starting to look their age, but he's still like, even just based on that trailer, he's still got it. And McQuarrie knows how to make him look real good.
mhm.
Like he knows him so well now. I got a question about Ed Harris.
Yes,
Like, Ed Harris turns up for like a minute and a half.
yeah.
Is he in the original? Is this a callback to the original? Is he in, or
No,
is this just like special guest star
I think it's a
Ed
special
Harris?
guest star. To be honest, my thought was that maybe they wanted to get James Tolkien, but then couldn't. James Tolkien, who very
Is that
famously,
Strickland?
yeah, Principal Strickland from Back to the
Right.
Future,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
who very specifically, like, if you're an '80s movie nerd, you've seen him in a bunch of stuff, but what you really
Mm-hmm.
remember him from are Back to the Future and Top Gun. And
Mm-hmm.
there's other things as well, but those are the two things that he's like best known for.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if maybe they just couldn't get him back for some reason, and they wanted someone with a
Mm-hmm.
similar level of gravitas and
Yeah.
grumpiness.
and,
Uh,
and Harris is so great though. He's in this movie like 6, 7 shots, and
he's only
what?
in the very beginning of the first act, which is really functions as a prologue. Like, it's not
Yeah,
even
yeah.
part of
But
the
he's
story
great.
proper.
He's so effective, isn't he, as an actor in that role, that he's a real highlight, I think.
Yeah, and who's the? There's a name that I wanted to bring up that has escaped my brain because I closed the window with the cast list. It's
Apparently, Manny Jacinto's in it. I didn't see him in it.
uh,
Jason from The Good Place is in it somewhere, but I didn't
he
spot him.
yeah, I remember seeing him, and I don't remember where. But the person I'm trying to think of is um, Bashir Salahuddin, who
Oh
plays
yeah,
Hondo, the new,
yeah.
like, the ground guy who's Maverick's sort of like, you know, I guess the British Army term would be his Batman. The person who's always there, making sure he's taken care of.
Yeah.
Um, and he's a sort of he again. He's another case of that's a pretty thinly written character who
Mm-hmm.
ends up being wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, fully, it's amazing. And I know it's a collaboration between the performance and the writing, but him and Jennifer Connelly's character especially have so little and so much to work with at the same time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
their characterizations are so efficient that you can think back to them after the fact as fully formed characters, despite not really having that much to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely.
I very much appreciate how well written this movie is.
Yeah, I mean that goes absolutely to support that. Even when you've got smaller characters like this having a massive impact and a believable impact, and it's very very difficult to get an ensemble right. And this film is a huge ensemble with Tom Cruise at the peak of it all, and every character is balanced really well. Also, the editing is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. With all in the last act, you have multiple planes doing multiple things at different times, and I didn't lose track of them once. And I
Yeah, that's
that's
a good point. The
the choreography of it was excellent.
yeah, the choreography and the for Similar to, I think I said this about Aquaman, for a movie that doesn't have any, it's in the sky, so there's no physical geography. You never lose
Mm-hmm.
track of the geography of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's and Manny Jacinto was one of the pilots. I just double checked. He's
Oh, really?
he was Fritz.
Didn't make the cut though.
Yeah, I don't think he made the mission at the
Spoiler.
end.
Spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
but hey, at least
the,
this one had Asian people in it. So
um, it's worth mentioning as well that the there's a moment in the last act which we've talked about on text this morning that is it is fan servicey, but it's such a gleeful moment when you realize what's about to happen. And
yeah,
I can't say anymore.
you really
I can't
can't.
say more
You
because it
should
would ruin it.
honestly,
But
honestly, you shouldn't have even said that much.
it's
But
it's
it's so perfect.
oh no, come on. There's a lot that happens in the last act. There's lots and lots and lots of things that could fall under what I've just described. But it's just good. It's just really like nice and good. None of it made me roll my eyes and go, "Oh my god, that's the guy from episode 4 that they meet in the bar, and why is he even in the Jedi Temple right now?" There's no eye rolling callbacks, or
Yeah,
there's no eye rolling moments. It's just really nicely done.
and it is worth noting that the mission that they're trying to perform is just the trench run from Star Wars.
It
It is
totally is.
literally,
It
it's
really is.
fly through a cavern at way too low and then deliver a bomb in a tiny port with laser-like precision. And of course, do you think that maybe their instruments will fail? I'm not going to tell you that that happens,
Do you
but
think it's the force is yourself?
yeah,
The
yeah,
force is you.
yeah. Anyway,
Oh,
I love this film. I loved it from. I think it is a very close second for me in terms of like the best things I've seen all year. I think Everything Everywhere Still at Once is still my number one movie of the year, but
yeah.
this is a very, very, very close second.
I,
And
films are yeah.
I have
Films are interesting
pre-ordered
when
both of those films, and I already know which one of those two I can tell you for sure I'm watching again first.
that's the thing. Like Everything Everywhere All at Once is a phenomenal piece of art that is very likely to be my best movie of this year and maybe the last couple of years. But Top Gun Maverick is the movie I'm going to put on over and over and over, like when I'm doing stuff, because it is so just rewarding as a movie. And to be fair,
To be
it would
fair,
have to be fair, it could it would have been the easiest thing in the world for them to do a quick Top Gun cash in with Tom Cruise. Like they did not have to put this level of good into this movie, and it would have made money because it's a Top Gun sequel with Tom Cruise. The fact that it is so thoughtful and so well done in how it relates to the original story and evolves the original story, I just hope that's a precedent for more things like that.
I mean, I think that's how Cruise operates, though, right? Like he doesn't choose projects that he doesn't have a level of control over, and he does seem and I am of the Scientology is a cult. Let's not mince words about it, but and he's definitely deep in that cult, but he does genuinely seem to always want to make good movies, and he wants to make them in the way he knows how, which is with putting his body on the line and doing things as authentically as possible. And I very much appreciate him for that.
Did
I
you see the pre reel when he talks to the audience? Like, we've been wanting to show this movie to you. I don't know why he's a gangster from New York. We've been wanting to show this movie to you for years. Thank you for watching Top Gun in the theater. Did you
yeah,
see that when he's
yep.
and it feels genuine. It does feel genuine.
Yeah, I saw it. I've seen a couple of interviews with him now too, mostly on red carpets. And inevitably, someone says, "So, what about the future? Is there going to be more Top Gun?" And one thing I really appreciate about him is he's like, you know what? We worked so hard on this movie, and so many people contributed and collaborated to make it a real thing, and the response has been so wonderful that I'm just focusing on this movie right now. And
Mm-hmm.
and as much as it is, you know as much as it's a nostalgia fueled cash in, because it is on some level that, but it's not a cynical one. And
Mhm.
I genuinely appreciate that, whether or not there are plans for more. Um, I genuinely appreciate that he's like, we don't need to talk about that right now. We could just like enjoy
Yeah,
this moment, enjoy what we've done. Like, think
yeah.
about the people who, because he does seem to, again, he said that's a major plot point in the movie, with an unsubtle metaphor about movie making. When an
Mhm.
admiral's saying that, like, you pilots will be obsolete one day, all you did was buy time for yourself, and he looks out a window at a bunch of other pilots and says, no, I bought time for all of them. And he does, yeah, he does seem to genuinely care, and I do very
Yeah,
much appreciate that about him. And for
yeah.
all his cultiness and strange behavior over the years, I have always been a fan, and I always will be a fan, unless it turns out that he's done something awful, of course. But it's,
Well, yeah, that's always the thing, isn't it?
yeah.
But so how many stars are you giving Top Gun Maverick, Matt?
Well, 5 is the most, so that's how many I'm giving it.
um,
Is it a 4 or a 5 for you, Simon?
I feel like now today it's a really solid 4. I feel like by the end of this year, when I've watched it maybe 20 more times, like it means a lot to me that my kids, both of my kids, were really into this movie, and it's not the kind of thing we usually take them to go see. It's definitely like upper scale, and my son, who is definitely on a spectrum, was giving a really cool director's commentary to the people around him because he was really into it. We had to tell him to be quiet a few times. My daughter went. My daughter adorably went to get water and came back. He said, "So I just missed a bit. Why did he dress up like a prince to go and see Penny in the bar?" Because he
It shows
goes
up in his
he put
dress whites, yeah.
yeah, these dress whites. And why? Oh, the other thing I can't, because it's a spoiler, but there was one part in the movie that because you forget kids have zero context. I'll tell you when we finish the podcast, but it was just adorable, and they both really loved it. They really liked it, and they got sad at the sad bits, and they got happy at the happy bits. And when I asked them their favorites at the end, and they talked about the end, and they have no filter. If they don't like something, they'll tell you. My daughter's biggest complaint was that the seat was slightly uncomfortable, which is which is which is
That's amazing.
not much I can do about that. But I think I'm going to take it to the cinema in the US where you have the electric recliners that I slept through Godzilla in like a baby. So I'll take it to that one day. But it's really means a lot to me that there's a movie like this that is like the movies that made me love movies. Do you know what I mean? This is the
Hmm.
kind of thing I saw when I was young. So I think it will eventually become a 5.
Yeah.
Um, because it really is a 5-star movie. Like personal preference aside, it's functionally perfect, and it is really well written and well done and really enjoyable. And I don't know, it's great. Good job, Top Gun people.
Yeah. Well, so that's that. The Righteous, you should watch it. I liked it, Simon didn't. Top Gun, you should watch it. It's one of the best movies of the year so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think we're going to end it there, because what else can we possibly say that isn't a
No,
spoiler?
nothing.
It's nothing.
It's a
So,
good way to end.
Uh, thank you all for listening. If you would like to support us, this is where I say my usual spiel. 5-star reviews on your podcasting platform of choice. Like us, subscribe us, share us on the social medias. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at AwesomeFridayCA, and Patreon will be linked in the show notes if you want to support us a little more directly. Um, We produce this on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations here in beautiful Vancouver, BC. And thank you for joining us on this Awesome Friday.
Bye bye.